Well, I want to share a story with you this morning. It's an actual story. It's a true story from history. It's about a man by the name of Nicholas of Myra. Now, Nicholas lost his parents at a young age, but he did something you wouldn't normally expect a young orphan to do. He took his... Whoops. Let's go to a blank screen real quick. We're not ready for that just yet. Sorry about that. We'll get there. For those of you who are excited to see a little bit of the Nutcracker, it's coming, I promise. But no, we're talking about Nicholas of Myra. He lost his parents at a young age, and he did something with his inheritance you wouldn't have expected. He used it to help the poor. He used his inheritance to help the poor and the needy. Now, it shouldn't come as a surprise to us that this generous young man grew up to be a priest and eventually became the bishop of the city of Myra. Now, Myra was an ancient city in what's now Turkey. And Nicholas had a passion for ministering to the poor and the needy. Now, there was one story about how giving Nicholas was, and this is the story. There was a family with 3 daughters, and the father didn't have enough money to pay the dowries for all 3 daughters. And in case you're unfamiliar with the practice of the dowry, once upon a time, in order to marry off a daughter, a father had to pay her future in-laws a sum of money called a dowry. Well, without a dowry, his daughters were not likely to get married, and if he couldn't find good husbands for his daughters, he would be forced by financial necessity to sell them into servitude, essentially sell them into slavery. And when Nicholas found out about this, 3 nights in a row, he snuck into their house and left money that would go for the daughters' dowries. So in essence, out of his generosity, Nicholas rescued these 3 young women from a lifetime of slavery. Nicholas of Myra would eventually be made a saint, and his feast day was celebrated on December 6th. It would have been celebrated this past week. And by the 1600s, a tradition developed in the Netherlands in which Dutch children would leave their shoes out overnight on December 5th. And the next morning, on St. Nicholas's feast day, they would find gifts in their shoes. And they called St. Nicholas by the nickname Sinterklaas. Well, I think you know by now where this story is going. Nicholas would eventually become known here in the United States as Santa Claus, the kindly, grandfatherly old man who leaves presents for children on Christmas Eve while they sleep. Now, most of us know about Santa Claus, but this morning I'd like to introduce you to another kind, generous, gift-giving old man associated with Christmas. He's a prominent figure from the ballet, The Nutcracker. His name is Herr Drosselmeyer. Drosselmeyer is a well-respected man in his community. Even the kids love him. In fact, he's the godfather to the main character in The Nutcracker, Clara Stahlbaum. Now, Drosselmeyer arrives at the Stahlbaum's Christmas Eve party, and he entertains the children with wind-up toys, a ballerina, a dancing clown, a toy soldier. And then he gives Clara and her brother Fritz, you weren't here last week, but when I heard the name Fritz, I automatically thought of you. But, side note, when Fritz first introduced himself to me and he gave me a trick to remember his first name, he said, Fritz, like a dog. Well, here we've got a character who is completely human named Fritz. So, there you go. But anyway, Drosselmeyer gives Clara and Fritz their Christmas gifts. Clara, he gives a nutcracker. So let's take a look at what happens next after Clara receives her gift. So Fritz breaks Clara's nutcracker. And what a little brat he was. In fact, brat's not the word I want to use, but the word I want to use, I probably can't appropriately use from the pulpit. But Drosselmeyer gives Clara this beautiful gift, and Fritz snatches it away and tears it up. But Drosselmeyer steps in. He bandages the nutcracker and gives it back to her. Now, later when the party is over, all the guests leave, The family goes to bed. Clara steps out and goes looking for her Nutcracker, and she falls asleep holding on to it. So then Drosselmeyer comes back. Now, personally, I'd like to know what tool he was using. Looked like he fixed the Nutcracker with a screwdriver. Now, that's quite the miracle tool if it can fix a Nutcracker. I'm going to confess I got a little choked up when I watched this part for the first time, and it wasn't the kindness or the gentleness of Drosselmeyer that got me the most. It was that he fixes her beloved toy while she sleeps. She doesn't even know he's doing it. She didn't ask for it. She didn't expect it, and she did nothing to make it happen. Out of his love for his goddaughter, Drosselmeyer fixes the gift that was broken. And what gets me about his expression of love is that it reminded me of the love that God has for us. It reminded me of several verses in the Bible, but most notably this one. You see, at just the right time, when we were still powerless, Christ died for the ungodly. God demonstrates his own love for us in this: while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Now, the essence of these two verses is that when we were helpless to help ourselves, God stepped in and gave us the help that we needed. Now, specifically in this passage, the help that he offered was paying a debt that we owed as a human race for our collective evil. It was a debt that we had no way to repay, and God, by giving up the infinitely valuable life of his own Son, paid that debt in full. He acted on our behalf when we could do nothing for ourselves. We didn't know he was doing it at the time. We didn't ask for it. We did nothing to make it happen. And just like Clara's Nutcracker, our gift had been broken. You see, just as Drosselmeyer gave Clara a gift, God has given us a gift. He's given us many gifts, in fact. He gave us ourselves. He gave us each other. He gave us himself. And he gave us this world that we live in, a world he once described as very good. But we became broken. Our relationships with each other became broken. Our relationship with God became broken, and even our relationship with the natural world became broken. The difference, though, is that unlike Clara, we broke our gift. We can't point the finger at anybody else. We, together as a human race, broke the gift that God gave us. But Just like Drosselmeyer, God stepped in when we weren't expecting it, in a way we weren't expecting it, to fix the damage. Now, Drosselmeyer had a tool that seemed to work miracles. Well, guess what? God sent a tool that most certainly did work miracles. His Son, Jesus. You see, God acted first without having any help from us to create us, and He acted first without any help from us to save us. Not only did we do nothing to help God show His love for us, we did nothing to deserve or to earn it. He gives His love freely, and He always has. Our God has always been the God who initiates, the God who acts first without being asked. He knows what needs to be done to help us, and He does it. It was He who spoke the universe into existence. It was He who gave life to all of the creatures in the world. It was He who fashioned us human beings in His own image. It was He who reached down into the life of a man named Abram to change the world forever. It was He who rescued Abram's descendants from slavery and made them into a nation that would bear His name to the rest of the world. It was He who made Himself fully known through the person of His Son Jesus, that baby born in Bethlehem 2,000 years ago. And you know what else? It's He who knew you before you were born. Before you were even conceived, He knew who you were. And it's He who even now knows you better than you know yourself. It's He who knows every secret you keep, even from those closest to you. And yet, in spite of that, or maybe even because of that, He continues to love you. Whether in spite of or because of the part of you you hide from the rest of the world, God loves you. And it's He who calls to your heart. It's He who places that suspicion in your heart that there must be something more to life. It's He who puts that longing for peace in the face of death in your mind. It's He who pricks your conscience when you're doing something you know to be wrong. It's He who welcomes you into His spiritual family with open arms when you choose to put your complete and total trust in Him. It's He who makes you a brand new person by letting His Spirit take up residence in your heart. It's He who teaches you how to live the life-giving, God-honoring way He created you to live. And it's He who empowers you to live that way. It's He who catches you and keeps you from falling into the pit of despair when it seems like you have nothing left, no reason left to go on. And it's He who catches you when this world slips from your grasp when death comes. It's He who takes you to a home made just for you. It's He who's coming back one day to raise the dead and eliminate injustice, evil, and oppression from this world once and for all. It's He who will once and for all heal this broken world, fix this broken world, and usher in the eternity that is promised in the revelation of Jesus Christ to John of Patmos when John writes, "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, 'Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and He will dwell with them. They will be His people, and God Himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will be no death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away.' He who was seated on the throne said, 'I am making everything new.'" We look forward to the day when, like Drosselmeyer, God will fix the gift that's been broken. But He is the one who acts. He is the one who has always acted first. Not because we ask for it, not because we're looking for it. We may not even know we need it. But God is the God who acts first. The only responsibility we have is to respond to what He's done. And just in case you're wondering, we can sum up the response He's looking for with one word. Let me ask you something. What do you think Drosselmeyer wanted from his goddaughter for his generous gift? Now, certainly his priority was her joy, her happiness, and that was satisfaction enough. But if she was going to give him something in return, what do you think he wanted more than anything else? Her love. And that's what God wants from us. That one word, love, summarizes what God hopes to have back from us for all he does. And in our case, in the case of our relationship with God, love leads to trust. And trust leads to obedience. If we trust that God seeks what's truly best for us, the natural consequence of that trust is living as he calls us to live. So that's the response that God is looking for in giving us these precious gifts. He's looking for our love. And if our love is genuine, it leads to a trust. And if our trust is genuine, it leads to obedience. But it always starts with God. Our God is the God who acts first. He's the one who calls us. He's the one who initiates. And when he acts on our behalf, when he comes to our aid, when he comes to help us, when we are powerless to help ourselves, he does so out of pure, tender, and generous love.